Hello again. Right, so we're going to be talking about reasonable adjustments on this. So, based on our behaviours, it came through, particularly at school, to get on top of behaviours. I think we have to understand the reasonable adjustments and why reasonable adjustments are put in place. Um, Andre, I don't know if you saw a television program. It's a school-based program. Oh gosh, I forget the actual name of it, but they were highlighting that there was loads and loads of children with reasonable adjustments and how they were taking advantage of it and using it, and how the school would have to cut back on reasonable adjustments because the kids were just um, taking advantage of what was there. And I could understand the point they were making, but they actually trivialized the reasoning behind reasonable adjustments. And you mentioned in the talk we had on behavior is a legal right.
Yeah.
And I don't think everybody, and particularly schools, actually acknowledge this is a reasonable, it is a legal right,
Yeah.
and that it does hold weight. But when it's one of the biggest arguments and frustrations we have within schools that I've come across anyway. So what would you say with regards to reasonable adjustments we should be looking at?
Okay. So, as you've said, reasonable adjustments are it's the law. So there is the Equality Act 2010, and that sets out who reasonable adjustments should be made for, and what those should encompass. And that's for work-based, that's for everybody, basically. The law is there for everyone. But as part of the public sector equality duty within that law, there is an expectation that schools will make reasonable adjustments for anybody with a disability. And under the law, that basically that disability is something that has a long-term effect on how they manage their day-to-day life. So that could be anything from a neurodivergence, it could be a physical disability, it could be an emotional issue, or it could be something as simple as a bereavement, it could be anything at all. And it actually, the Equality Act now includes, for example, long COVID.
Yeah.
So there are a number of things that are included within that where a school would be expected to make reasonable adjustments. So, for example, if you had a young person who was in a wheelchair, you would make a reasonable adjustment that meant that there was a ramp so that they could actually physically get into the building. For neurodivergence, it might be, or a sensory need, it might be something as simple as we're going to allow you to wear a different item of clothing for your school uniform, because actually the normal school uniform that everybody else is able to wear might be a little bit itchy or scratchy for you, or you don't like that material. So actually we'll make a reasonable adjustment and allow you to wear a different material, or to not wear a tie, or to not wear a blazer, or something like that. So there are also reasonable adjustments in as much as somebody who has a vision impairment. A reasonable adjustment would be to seat them in the classroom where they feel most comfortable. They may feel most comfortable near to a window, or completely on the opposite side of the room where there are no windows. So a reasonable adjustment is anything that makes life easier for that young person, due to the fact that they have a long-term need,
Okay.
whatever that may be.
So here's I've heard it quite a few times. We're already making reasonable adjustments. We've made reasonable adjustments for children with autism. Um, and for me, it's nothing to do with a child with autism, whatever. It's what that individual needs. It's not a
Correct.
diagnostic adjustment. It's an individual adjustment.
Mhm.
And what is needed for one person may not be for the other, which then becomes the problem for the schools tend to think. So we have to do this for every single child, and this is what this school program was trying to highlight. And I understand it is difficult, but I think that if they get it right and understand children, for every child in that class, by just one or two children getting that adjustment, could be huge for everybody.
Correct. So as I said in the last video clip, so what you do for one child is not just going to impact that one child. It's probably going to impact quite a number of children within your classroom. So say, for example, you have a visual timetable, and that is for a specific child that is autistic. So they need that visual timetable at the front of the classroom so they know what lesson is coming up next and what their day looks like.
Mm-hmm.
So you've made a reasonable adjustment for that person, that young person who's autistic. They can see that, but actually that's probably going to benefit every other child in your classroom, because then they know, they're aware of what's coming up. So something that would be classed then as additional to and different from, and not a reasonable adjustment, would be if that young person had their own visual timetable in front of them and somebody had to go through that timetable and remove parts of that timetable as each section came along. That would be classed as additional to and different from. But if you had that visual for everybody, that's a reasonable adjustment. So there is a fine line sometimes between what's a reasonable adjustment and what's additional to and different from. But like I say, the things that you can do for one person in the classroom are going to benefit probably quite a lot within your classroom.
Yeah, yeah.
And again, it's the idea that, well, if we do it for one, we have to do it for all. Well, yes, you do,
Yes.
because it's the law. And actually,
Exactly.
going back to what you said a few seconds ago, is about it's individual to the young person. You can't just say, well, we make reasonable adjustments because we do this. Well, actually, that whatever it is you're going to do is not going to benefit every child. So there are different ways of doing it. You need to look at what the needs are in your classroom, because you might find that there are 3 or 4 reasonable adjustments that can actually meet the needs of 90% of your class.
Yeah.
Whereas if you're making one for one child, that's fine, that's what that child needs. But let's make them and understand the needs of every child in the classroom. Ask them, speak to them, see what they want, get the child and young person voice, because they will tell you what they need. My daughter was absolutely excellent at it in school. She basically said to the school, this is what I need. This is what I know the reasonable adjustments are that you need to make for me. And eventually the school made them. So it's a two-way thing. But they also, what you have to remember is as well, reasonable adjustments that are made are, the duty is to be preemptive in your reasonable adjustments. Don't expect somebody to crash and burn or fail before you make those reasonable adjustments.
Yeah.
Those reasonable adjustments need to be made as soon as you know the need of a young person or of a class. And those reasonable adjustments have to be made at that point so that the young person doesn't have to crash and burn, because
No.
that's not what it's about. It's
No, no, indeed.
supporting
Nicola.
where it's needed.
Hi, yeah, I'm just to support what Andrew's saying, but also to I suppose emphasise thinking about our young people as individuals within a classroom as well is important, and getting those needs recognised and documented. We hear it so many times on assessment from schools. We're already doing this. We even get it from local schools with autism units, who will not sort of identify an individual pupil with a specific need or treat them individually. Because it only takes, I mean, you guys will know this better than anyone, a very small change in someone's life, a change of teacher, a change of classroom, a change of school, a change of circumstance, for that all to be forgotten and missed because we're lumping everyone in because we were doing this last month. If it's not documented, if it's not a part of a plan, then it doesn't mean a great deal some of the time. So I just wanted to emphasize the importance of that. And as professionals, I appreciate often mental health services and education provisions get bad press, but actually to be alongside a parent as a professional and being persistent with that key message, really, in that this young person needs their own plan and their own recognised reasonable adjustments is vital.
So I'll come to you in a minute, Penny, but can I just ask in terms of we've got, let's say, 3, 4 children that need reasonable adjustments, but because of the diagnosis potentially or the difficulties that individual may be having in the classroom, one of the reasonable adjustments we've made is actually causing one of the other children real severe problems, and they can't cope with that new reasonable adjustments been put in place. How do the teachers or schools deal with that particular situation?
So again, that would be part of that conversation. So what we try and do in schools is to ensure that all children in a classroom realise that everybody has a different need within the classroom, so that there might be some people who need, like you say, one specific reasonable adjustment, and somebody else might have a problem with that. But actually, it's about that understanding. It's about that sort of working together with those young people to actually help them to understand, well, you need this, but such and such needs this. So actually, we need to support you both. So, and this is what we're going to do. If it becomes a major issue, then obviously, I mean, I don't know what that actually looks like with regards to what that reasonable adjustment might be that's causing the problem. But actually, that's something that you would need to look at on a holistic basis of classrooms and teachers and pupils within classrooms.
Yeah.
But there's always a way around it. There's always something that you can do. It's about everybody understanding each other and helping and supporting each other, and knowing that everybody might need something different, and that we have to respect that.
Yeah. Penny, sorry to keep you waiting.
No, that's absolutely fine. I was going to mention, because we talk about it has to be person-centered, and what we know is, and I'm going to link this back to behaviour because I link everything back to behaviour, is that if you don't need that reasonable adjustment, whether that reasonable adjustment is there or not, it doesn't affect you. So the reasonable adjustment only helps the person it's supposed to help, or the group of people it's supposed to help, as Andrea said, like with the visuals. There could be, you put a visual schedule in for someone with a learning disability or autism. Well, there could be somebody also in the class who has had difficulty with processing and it's not been picked up, and then it helps. But your youngsters who don't need it and won't be bothered by it.
Yeah.
If they are, they're just testing the ground. So often you hear teachers say, I've got 30 children in my class, not one.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter. You could have 100 children in the class. The 99 that don't need that reasonable adjustment won't be bothered with it. 2 out of the 99 may test the boundaries because that's their personality, and they may think there's something, I might like that reasonable adjustment, and then they actually find out, no, I don't like that reasonable adjustment, I'm just going to go back into the mainstream. And I was also going to mention about, and as Andrea and Nikki were saying, to support them in what they were saying about, it is the person. The reasonable adjustment is needed for the person, who they are. How is that communicated within the school? How does the young person have control over that? So can say, oi, hang on a minute, you're supposed to have put my paper, a yellow screen over my paper so that I can read it, some visuals adaptations. So I promote the use of communication passports, very much so, but they are owned by the young person. So the young person has a copy, as well as the teachers, the schools, the GP, whoever else needs it. But it belongs to the child and the family. And that a communication passport would have all your reasonable adjustments in as well.
Mm-hmm. Sorry. Okay. And this might be for Nicola, really. So we've got the reasonable adjustments and they've got the passport. Teachers aren't necessarily putting the reasonable adjustments in place. And then you ask the teacher, why wasn't this done? Well, they never asked me. They didn't come to me and tell me they didn't have it. So you asked the child. I couldn't. I didn't feel confident enough, or if it was really uncomfortable to actually go and talk, because it highlighted that I'm having an issue. How do you get over that part?
Um, I'll I'll come back in here. So again, we're now talking about sort of what I said in the earlier session on behaviour. Who's got the issue? It's the teacher's got the issue because she hasn't found out, not the young person. The teacher hasn't found out the needs of the people in her class or his class. Being a bit stereotypical there, aren't I? Her class, his class. It's not for the child. Imagine you've got a real issue, and just imagine yourself as an adult that you go into an environment and you thought everybody knew that you don't like fish, for instance.
Yeah.
And suddenly you're served with fish. Are you going to stand up and go, oh, excuse me, I don't like the fish, or I'm allergic to the fish? You're going to do everything, aren't you, to try and avoid that? People might look at you a bit strangely. What are they doing? Why have they moved that to the side of their plate and everything? But that's the same for reasonable adjustment, isn't it? The person should have known who they've been inviting in. They should have made those inquiries. That's a reasonable adjustment, finding out who you've got.
That's going back to the idea that it's preemptive, that you need to understand in order to put those reasonable adjustments into place. And sometimes that's where schools struggle a little bit, is understanding that need. So it's about identification of need and identification of what somebody might need, preempting them actually coming into a classroom.
Right.
I think the reality is it's very challenging though, isn't it, as a parent? And I see this a lot in my assessments, particularly with families with, I saw someone recently and there was 2 children with ADHD and one undiagnosed ASC, and I was encouraging mum to make a parental request for an EHCP plan. I've never met a young person who was so affected really by autism, wasn't in school. And I think what she was saying was, that's great, but I've got a son on an EHCP plan and it doesn't happen. It can, she was really worn down with it. And I do see that, it's really hard, isn't it, to keep banging on the door and saying, but this is what my child's entitled to, because sometimes we can't rely on the teachers. Yes, it's their job. Yes, we've got the law, but sometimes it's just not happening because for various reasons, I suppose. So I think, trying to keep that energy up as a parent to keep fighting for your child is really difficult. And I think what we've all seen in our experiences is those assertive parents who are banging on the doors, do get their child's needs met much better. But the other parents who are less assertive, who are a bit worn down by the system, it can be an onward struggle, really. So I guess we're sort of edging into resiliency here, aren't we? But I think that's the role of support groups, of charities, of finding some forums, to energize, really, to keep going with the battle, really, because it's probably a constant battle, because the next year your child moves to a different classroom with a different teacher, and then we start the whole process again, don't we? Are their needs being met now? Oh, let's find out. It might take a day to find out, or it might take 3 months, but you've got to be constantly on it, haven't you?
Yeah, very much. Stevie, you were going to say something?
Ultimately, all that comes back to your I theory, really. I find as a parent, it very much, you need that to approach the situation in the right light, because we can be overwhelmed. We're often very tired. And you want to go in going, why aren't you doing this? But that's not going to, build the right rapport, is it really? And so, your I theory, I think, is a great advice for parents in this sort of situation as well, really, not just for their child, but to go in and say, I'm aware, I don't understand, could you help and explain how this is, how this looks in the day, or it's
really important, isn't it, not to give up, and but it's, I think that's a really good reflection, that system can be helpful. Andrea,
sorry.
No, that's okay. It was just a quick one that there are some really good websites out there that will support with what reasonable adjustments could be made that might help your young person. So you've got the National Autistic Society, Autism Central, the Autism Education Trust, and the Autistic Girls Network. And they're also very, very good at helping you to actually understand how to speak to schools and settings to actually get those things in place. So that might be something that's useful to your parents and listeners as well.
Yeah, brilliant. So we'll get them listed under the resources so people can click onto them and get through to that. So that's really good. Brilliant. Again, another huge issue. And I think when we look at putting reasonable adjustments in place and we know it's a law, I've gone into schools or spoken to parents who are in primary school, and some of them aren't even aware about the reasonable adjustments that have actually been put in place because the teacher is so in tune with that particular child. They're making the adjustments automatically to make the child feel comfortable in there, so that when they're going on to secondary school or changing into another year, that information hasn't been passed on to the new teacher, and then we wonder why the child is struggling all of a sudden. They're looking to be coping so well, there's no issues. Well, actually, because you've made these changes, you've seen what needs to be done. Although it's brilliant for the child, if we don't document it, we're actually creating a bigger problem further down the line because we haven't highlighted the issue that the child is having.
I find it's quite hard to get those things highlighted adequately as well, because of the nature that they do them, second nature, really.
It's a very common issue and we see it all the time, and that's when our young people are presented to mental health services for diagnosis eventually at that transition point between primary and secondary. And they've been very well managed within the primary education, and then it all goes to pieces. So completely agree, and goes back to my point a while ago saying it's really important that we document the need of the young person, so that travels with them. And Penny's point about a communication passport, that it travels with them throughout their journey and beyond education as well. Because let's not forget, there are reasonable adjustments can be made in employment, etc.
So one-page profiles are very good at that, as well as your communication passports. So one-page profiles are something that secondary schools like, because they are, as they say on the tin, it's a one-page document, but it gives a clear view of what's needed for that individual young person. And a lot of them will have them on systems so that everybody can see them. So that communication passport or that one-page profile is key.
Yeah, definitely. Good. Penny, you had your hand up, did you?
Yeah, both my colleagues have mentioned again the communication passport and the one-page profile, which are imperative. People need to be doing these, and they're working documents, so they change, they need updating, they're not a static document. And parents have parents' evening. That's when these kind of things can be discussed. Okay, let's get out the so how have we managed with this reasonable adjustment? How is she managing with what we've put in here? How are you managing with that? It's a tool to have that discussion as well. It's a tool to open up. Well, what are you doing in this situation? How are you finding that? Is that presenting a difficulty for you or the young person? How can we change it?
Yeah, I totally agree. And we don't do that because, again, I think as parents, sometimes we're not actually fully involved in the adjustments that are being made because some of the decisions are made in school, and sometimes by accident we've found out that they've been put in place. I have had that this last 2 weeks, where there's been a couple of parents that said, "Oh, I didn't know we'd actually done that. Did I have to sign something?" Says you should be involved in all of these conversations, not just finding out about it like this. So within the, let's say, the one-page profile, who's responsible for putting that together? Should the parent put it together to give to the school, or should the school be doing it for the teachers?
I would say parents need, I mean, Andrea might disagree with me here. I would say parents need to lead this.
And the young person. Yeah.
And the young person.
I think so.
There's lots of templates out there. The one-page profile comes from the communication passport. So the communication passport has all the detail in. The one-page profile is the quick grab sheet, as I call it. You know, what is it I need to know now? But it needs to be the responsibility, and the parents need to have, and young person need to have ownership.
Yeah.
Because that then gives them the, I don't want to use this word, but sort of control. They're empowering because it's their information they're giving to school rather than the other way around.
Yeah, yeah. And I think to finish this particular one off, maybe a webinar on how do you create a one page, because it sounds easy, but actually putting the right information in is very, very tricky.
Yes. Like they say, they're one-page profiles, so actually you need to be really clear and succinct in what you put in there. And again, like you say, a webinar would be a good idea, but there are some really good websites again. So Helen Sanderson Associates is amazing, so that she does one-page profiles, and also Chef Kids as well. So there are some really good pro formas that you can actually use, but we can do something around how to actually create that with your young person.
Yeah, and also present it to the school as well. With how do you present it, because that's going to be the foundation of making it work properly, isn't it?
Yes, absolutely. Yes.
Yeah. Brilliant. Thank you very much for that. And we'll do our next one on, I think everybody's favorite, sleep. My child doesn't sleep. Let's find out why. We'll do that in a minute. So we'll just stop recording on this one here.